how to let go of your messed up childhood. Your childhood determines your love life nowadays. Also your friendships, how many friendships you have, how close the relationships are, your finances even, whether you're doing very well, not so well, somewhere in between. Either of those results are determined by your childhood, and even your physical appearance, your health, all of that is hugely determined by the way you grew up. And this video here is just a massive guide on, first of all, the psychology behind you still being caught up in your childhood and not fully letting go and growing out of that. And secondly, how you can let go of that, the action steps. But we need to start with the groundwork here. It's like building a house. You cannot start with the roof. We need to have the groundwork first. Now, first of all, I want to start with a metaphor, which I think is greatly displaying what is going on right now and what also basically how you grew up. So here is the following metaphor. When you come into this world as a little child, you're basically holding a bowl up towards your parents. And this bowl is empty when you grow up. But it's your birthright that this bowl is being filled with love and attention and care, support, even financial support. And what though happened over the years is that this bowl didn't get filled properly. And you grew taller and taller, and you're still standing here, holding the bowl up and waiting for somebody filling it. Some people maybe already started filling it with alcohol or distraction, such as like social media distraction or whatever. Some people are just getting angry, still have those bottled up feelings, bitterness, angerness, confusion, disappointment about why is this bowl not filled? When is it finally filled? There is still this hope. You still have subconsciously this hope that once somebody will finally fill that bowl. Maybe even your parents. And that's why you're also still maybe also feeling this bottled up anger. Maybe you don't feel anger yet. Maybe you feel just disappointment, anxiety, insecurity. That's all there is. But what you haven't noticed yet is that you're standing with this bowl right now, but you're an adult. And you can fill that bowl yourself. You can drag the right people in your life. You can give your own, yourself the love and compassion. You can take care for yourself right now. But this is exactly where you're stuck right now. Still holding up this bowl, not noticing that you're not this little kid anymore. And also, potentially, that you don't need to expect that your mother or your father in any way are going to fill that bowl now. Probably this is not going to happen anymore. At least you should not expect that and standing here just waiting. You've waited for too long. Okay. Now, I think it's very important when we talk about how to let go of your childhood, and this is what a lot of also clients come to me and say, oh, I have something in the childhood, is that we first of all figure out what is the specific topic? What are we talking about? Like, has your father been a narcissist, always nagging you, and nowadays you're just insecure and you don't have an own opinion? Is that what's going on? Or have you always been the small one in the family? Maybe you had 3, 4 siblings. You've always been the small one. Nobody really listened to you. And nowadays you just feel like you don't belong anywhere. You're always like with people, but not really in the group. You also don't even know what's your own opinion because nobody really asked you that. You never really ask yourself the question, what do I want? Because nobody ever cared. Is that the specific topic? Or have your parents been helicopter parents? They always made sure that nothing is going wrong. And nowadays, you don't even know who you are and what your own boundaries are. What do you want, what not, again. And when people are too much and when not, because you, again, don't notice that because your helicopter parents totally smashed your own boundaries throughout your childhood and you don't have an understanding of that. What's going on? What's the specific topic? I just throw out here a couple of examples because the more specific we are, the more we can work on that. Just generally complaining about childhood, this is not going to help you. And also, I want to give you a helpful framework right here. It helps you to reflect a little bit of what was going to happen, what happened in your childhood. It's by Erich Fromm, also a famous psychologist. And he talked about the role of a mother and the role of a father, as they are supposed to be, at least in the last century. Still nowadays, you still see that there tends to be gender roles in parenthood. So the mother by nature is more responsible for giving the child a feeling of unconditional love, of protection, of being the safe haven. And whenever they struggle and whenever they play somewhere and it's getting dangerous, they can always turn back to the mother and retreat. And they get this feeling of, I am good enough. As I am, I don't need to do anything for that. I can just be good enough. And then there's the father, who is more teaching the child those survival skills. There's a little bit of this conditional love. You need to perform, you need to go out there, you have some adventures, and your dad is like showing you how all that works and how life and reality works. And you basically learn how to manage life. And this tends to be more the role of the father. I know there are mixtures in between, and not everything is exactly like that, but there's a tendency. And what you notice, for example, just one example, if one of the roles cannot really display it in your childhood because maybe the father is traveling a lot because he has his own business, running a business, always never being home, or your parents got divorced, and then therefore one of the mother or the father is not really present a lot, or one of your parents is simply not interested in you, or for example, the father is way too dominant and the mother cannot express herself fully in her role because the father is so present and dominant. This is often then a problem if you don't experience both of the parent roles, the father and the mother. A small example. For example, your father is not really present because he's traveling all the time, running a business. You don't really have a lot of contact with him. And your mother is very overprotective, very sweet, very kind. And a lot of people who grew up that way, then later on struggle to set their own boundaries. They're very sweet, they're very kind, they're people pleaser, but they never really learned how to set boundaries, how to stand up for yourself, how to deal with reality. Those people tend to have a lot of anxiety or even depression. This is what often happens because they were missing this skill that they didn't learn in their childhood. If you go on the other side, so let's say the mother is not very present. Somehow she doesn't talk a lot and she's getting very suppressed also by the father because the father is maybe even a little bit of a narcissist, very demanding, a little bit over the top. What I often see is that those people later on in their adulthood, they tend to be maybe even workaholics. They never feel like they're good enough. They always feel like I need to do more, I need to prove somebody. I'm never good enough because my mother never gave me this feeling. My father was over demanding, never happy with me. So they also like insecure. They often then also don't have great relationships with females. Females are not so, if it's a guy, I'm talking about a guy right now, because the woman was never really important. At least that's how he saw it with his own parents. And they are more interested in working a lot and performing a lot, but still never being satisfied somehow. Could also be a case. That also means that you had a messed up childhood and you're still caught up in that. You're still trying to run like a hamster in the hamster wheel to somehow prove your father wrong, but it doesn't work because you never even managed to prove your father that you are good enough. Yeah, again, just rough roles with mother and father. I'm curious about your reflection right now, what you feel like you were missing. It's not necessarily the case that it needs to be that way, but both roles need to be present. So for example, I'm thinking about one client, she's from Asia, and she's the second daughter. And in her culture, males were preferred. So she sort of had the feeling that she was not really accepted in the family. And on top of that, her father was not present in her childhood. He was working in a different city. So then you could first of all start with a hypothesis of, well, this woman probably never learned those survival skills because the father was not there. But she was not like that. She was the opposite. She still is the opposite. She's very much a doer. Like, she started multiple businesses, very successful, putting a lot of discipline into her life. And that's probably because she was never really accepted in the family. She never felt this conditional love, a bit from her mother, but still she was also a bit demanding. So she learned early on that she needed to prove herself, and she did. And that's how she's rolling these days as well. So she had sort of this father wipe feelings within her family that had this unconditional love, but not in a healthy way. She really felt like she's not even allowed to be here in this family. So that's also considered a messed up childhood. Yeah. But anyway, by the way, if somebody's asking me, hey Marco, how was your childhood? I always say, which one do you mean? Because we can all complain about our childhood. Nobody had a perfect childhood. I can name a couple of things like this was not great, or this was not great, or this situation could have been handled differently. That's always the case. Your parents are not perfect. And nevertheless, I can also come up with hundreds of examples where my childhood was amazing and great and lovely. And so do you have those situations as well. If you think deep enough, you will find a lot of great situations where you felt really like beloved or just secure, just had like a blessed childhood, moments or days, maybe even weeks. And then there are also moments which were not very great. Yeah, and you need to keep that in mind as well. Also, do not overgeneralize. Just say, oh, my father was never here and he never taught me that. Well, probably it's not exactly like that. Maybe it is, but probably not. Yeah. Yeah, and for example, in the very beginning of this video, I said, for example, your love style, the way you lead relationships nowadays is influenced by your childhood. For example, you're a girl, a woman, and your father was in the past not very good at showing emotions. He was very distant. Maybe he also didn't care so much. And therefore, you developed an avoidant attachment style. Those attachment styles are all about how we establish relationships with others. And you're more of an avoidant person, very distant person. And you are looking also for people who are like that. So for example, you're looking for people who are also not very emotionally available. And then you're wondering, why am I always bumping into the wrong guys? Well, because you're attracted not by what you need, but what you're used to. Because your father was like that, not emotionally available. And now you think, well, that's probably love. So I need to feel this. So you go into toxic relationships and you feel like people are ignoring you and not treating you well, because you subconsciously think, well, this is how it's supposed to be. And if everything is fine, I don't deserve that. That's not how it should be. And that's why you're also looking for exactly those people, potentially, as partners. And maybe you don't have an avoidant attachment style where you keep a lot of distance. Maybe you're just looking for people who have those avoidant attachment styles. Maybe you have an anxious attachment style. So you're very insecure, you always seek the connection, but still you're looking for somebody who is not emotionally available. So you seek the connection, but your partner cannot give you that. And then there's friction and fights, and then you break up, and then you look for another guy with an avoidant attachment style. Just a couple of examples. I'm not saying that this is the case for you, but what you can maybe generally say is that often people look for partners what they're used to from their childhood. So they don't look for what they actually need and would make them happy, but what they're used to. I think this is something that you could broadly generalize. Okay. Now, let's slowly move on to the action steps, how you can let go of your messed up childhood, whatever it is. You probably defined it now a little more, what is specifically going on. Now, the first point is a quote that Carl Jung actually said. I want to read it out. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And this is what's holding you back. And this is why I ask also about your specific childhood, because you need to get the truth and you should stop deceiving yourself. It's very important that you get a good objective overview of your childhood. And there are two things holding you back. The one is idolization. This is one deception mechanism. That's, for example, I recently talked to somebody who said, no, my dad was great. Like, he was not really there, but he was always there for the important moments. He was always there on my birthday, I remember. He always made time for that. But he was not really there. But he was a great guy, you know? And then we dig deeper and then we noticed, well, actually, let's be honest, your father has almost never been there in your childhood. And you didn't really have a lot of contact with him. And that's hurting you a lot. And you're idolizing it by protecting him and saying, no, he was there for my birthday. He was a generally great guy, just a little busy, you know, with his company. And you're not looking at the truth, which is you're hurt and you didn't have a father when you were a kid. So that's the first important deception mechanism I see a lot. And the second one is simply suppression. And that's also what I noticed when I work with people in therapy or coaching over a couple of weeks, is that then they opening up, they trust and allow themselves to open up to this process of coaching. And then suddenly, you know, moments from their childhood pop up again and they remember situations and they're like, wow, I didn't think about that before. I totally suppressed that. That's also part of deception. So idolization and suppression. And by simply engaging in this process of working out your childhood again, the goal is to let go of both of them and really see your childhood as it is. And then you can work on that. Okay. And by the way, if you're opening up to that as well, and if you let go of this deception, probably some more emotions are popping up, just like bubbles, just like pop up, and maybe you get suddenly angry, or you feel very hurt, or you start crying. And those are all the bottled up emotions that you suppressed in some way. So that's part of the emotional digestion. You digest the emotions, and you haven't done that the last years. Okay. Let's talk about action steps. Take it as a library, because those are a lot of action steps. You don't need to do all of them. Just feel into it and what feels that resonates. What do you think, hey, I could do this too. Let's give this a try. Pick one or two and then come back and choose more later on. First of all, confront the conflict. By that, I don't mean that you need to confront a conflict, open up a conflict with your mother or father if they're still alive. I mean that you yourself have a conflict within you and you need to confront that. Maybe you struggle to set boundaries and it's time to set boundaries. Maybe you don't know how to make a decision on your own. You always ask people whether that's a good decision, whether you should do it. Learn to make a decision on your own. And if there's something going on in your life where you need to make a decision, do it and listen to yourself. Or stand up against your partner. And maybe even breaking up with your partner. I'm not saying that you should do that, but maybe that's a thing. Maybe you notice, I'm in a toxic relationship since years, but I don't allow myself to stand up for my own needs, because you learned in your childhood when you stand up for your own needs, you get punished for that. And you should just blindly say yes and amen. And now by actually talking about those conflicts with your partner, maybe even breaking up or standing up for yourself, you face that conflict. And this is also how you get more independent of your childhood, by actually doing the things that you're afraid of. Now, here's a little warning. Probably, if you do that and you open up this conflict, first of all, it will get worse. You will feel very insecure. Maybe you even decompensate, and you know, maybe you cry, you feel totally lost, and that all those feelings again pop up that you were bottling up the last years. Maybe you again feel like this little 7-year-old child who feels so helpless and not beloved at all. And that's exactly potentially the work that you need to do to open up with that. If that's a little too much to do this on your own, seek a therapist, a coach. Maybe that's also this action point right here is too rough for you at this point. Could be. Maybe it's exactly the thing you need. Maybe you should do a couple of other things beforehand. Okay. Next action step, what you could do, you could write a letter to your mother or your father. And in this letter, you write, first of all, doesn't matter, the order doesn't matter, but on the one hand, you talk about what you didn't like in the childhood and what we want let go of. what you don't want to keep anymore in your life. Maybe this feeling of not being good enough. You don't want to keep that anymore. Like, Dad, you gave me always this feeling. You can keep that. I don't need it anymore. Write about everything that hurts you and that you want to get rid of. And on the other hand, write about things that you liked, things that you learned, things that you want to keep from your childhood. And you write a letter as if you would do that to your mother or father, even if they're not alive anymore. And the point is, if they're alive, you don't send that letter to them. You maybe even burn it. You let go of that. That would be like a good ceremony to at some point just burn the letter. But writing this down and act like you would send it, that can be also a very therapeutic approach. Another idea is the inner child work. That's something you can do research on your own as well. I also do this often with my clients, where we simply go through visualizations and we go back into the past, even in a very specific situation. And you have a conversation with yourself, with this little, maybe 10-year-old. And you're standing in front of yourself, talking with yourself, give yourself a hug and give the support that you needed back in the days. That can be also very emotional. That's also helping to work out this, in a sense, trauma. The word trauma is Greek and simply means wound. And this is exactly what we're facing. And if you want to work out trauma, so such an emotional wound, basically, you can summarize how this works within one sentence. And it is, you meet your wounded places with compassion. And that's what you do in this inner child work. You meet this wounded place, you go back in time, you vividly imagine yourself being again right in this situation, and you meet this situation yourself with compassion and love. Okay. Yeah. Another action step would be simply to clear up your inner conflict. So I'm not saying to face it, but to clear it up, because you're still confused in some areas. You're still confused about what happened there. You probably still have a huge inner conflict of, wait, but my mother or my father were supposed to love me. And I should have been also grateful for them. But on the other hand, they treated me so bad. You're still confused about all that. Maybe even you are having some of the toxic behavioral patterns of your mother or father, and you notice that it really shaped you, and you also in some situations become very rude or narcissistic or manipulative, and you hate that about yourself, and you think, why am I doing this as well? Well, that's because in a sense you are loyal even to your father or your mother, because you're still taking those behaviors as well, and that makes you even more confused and hate yourself and hate them, and you need to create some clarity around that. It's also very much connected to the deception, which is probably still going on a lot, this idealization and suppression, and you cannot really make sense of all that. That's important that you talk more about that. And eventually, the next step, practice forgiveness. That's the last point, by the way, you can do when in the end you really can forgive. You can train that with the metta meditation. It's a love and kindness meditation, where you start to feel very loving towards somebody you're already very close, and you nurture this feeling, and then you go on visualizing other people in your life that you maybe don't even know, or just more distant friends, and you really wish them well, and you really can train this metta meditation. Studies have shown that. They've done a lot of studies in brain scanners also, where they notice so people can actually learn that. They can actually learn to feel love and kindness. And then at some point, you even visualize your, for example, mother or father, and you send them love and kindness. Yeah, so forgiving, and you can train that with the metta meditation. You can also do some research on YouTube. There are some guided meditations for that. Another one, sublimation. That's a coping mechanism. And basically you use the emotions that you have and you express them in a fruitful way. For example, you're angry, you go to the gym and let it out, don't suppress it. Or you notice, oh, I'm so insecure about my own life and what I want. Well, then you maybe just renovate your apartment, and you renovate it in a way where you feel, yes, that's me. I want to do that, and I like this color, and I like this plant, and this is what I buy. And by putting so much effort into this renovation, it could be also sort of a healing process. Just making an example here, but basically use the emotions that you have and do something with them, and do something fruitful. Create something positive with those emotions. Or maybe start drawing, do art, compose music that expresses your feelings. It's also sublimination, this coping mechanism. Very helpful, very therapeutic. Another one, chair work. Chair work means you put 2 chairs in the room. On the one hand, you're sitting on this one chair, and that's you. And on the other chair, you imagine, for example, your father or mother sitting, and you're having a conversation with them, and you're telling them what you always wanted to tell them. Then you switch the seat, you sit on the other seat, you imagine being your father or mother, and you feel into that. How do you feel about that? Your daughter or son saying this to you. And then you can respond as your mother or father. What would she probably say? And then you can switch places and basically have a conversation. That also is very helpful in a coaching setting. Yeah. What I don't want you to do, because I once talked with a client, and he said, I asked him, what do you think, what do you need to let go of your father? His father was very narcissistic and very demanding. And then he thought about it, and then he said, I think I need to become successful. I need to prove my father wrong. And that's exactly what you don't want to do. Because proving your father or your mother wrong and become successful, first of all, it's risky. You need to become successful, first of all, in your perception. The question is, when are you successful, when not? You probably never feel successful. That's the other point. But also, right now, you're emotionally dependent on the opinion of your father. In this example, for example. You depend on your father saying, oh, you are worthy, son. Now I notice it. And simply you being motivated to do your own thing and prove them wrong shows that you're still caught up in this entire childhood. And that's why you should not do that. It takes you years until you realize it again and you notice I didn't actually move ahead a single step. So that's what you should not do. If you have those thoughts, that's okay. It's part of it, but don't try to act on them. Because this does not work. It's a strategy that would not bring you happiness and help you to let go of your childhood. All right, we're coming to an end. If you gained a couple of insights here, or maybe even gained a couple of questions, sometimes it's not about the answers, just about the questions that you generate. That might be already helpful. But if you're still noticing, I think I need some help with that. I think I would like to talk with somebody about that. Then I suggest that we are talking. You can actually schedule a call with me. There's a link below the video. And then we will personally have a chat, and we talk about how working together would look like. We even create, and that's still for free, we create an individualized strategy for you, how you can let go of your childhood, what you need to be able to let go of that. And we really create a strategy, a step-by-step strategy. And then afterwards, in the end, we can decide whether you want to do this on your own or whether we want to work together for a couple of weeks and months and together let go of your childhood. All right. With that being said, I wish you a beautiful day.